Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bearded Bastard Outdoors. If this is your first time tuning in to one of my videos, let me be the first to welcome you to the channel. I hope it brings you immense value. Today we're in the woods and we're going to talk about traps and snares. Traps and snares, of course, being a passive means of acquiring food that dates back to thousands of years. And we're going to focus on some very simple concepts so that we can lay the foundation so you can build upon it and begin your journey of discovery of traps and snares. So stay tuned. Or the main thing we need to keep in mind when it comes to trapping and snaring is what kind of animal are we going after? That will obviously dictate the size of the trap or snare, and also what kind of bait you're using, etc. But for sake of argument, we're going after a rabbit, okay? And the first trap that we're going to talk about is a spring snare. Spring snare being what it sounds like. You would want to use a spring snare to get your meal off of the ground. If you just have a simple snare along a rabbit trail and it gets caught and dies, it's subject to other predators in the area, whether it be a coyote or bobcat or whatever. So the spring snare offers the bit of advantage to you in order to get it off the ground. A consideration is that your spring pole should be strong enough to lift that animal off the ground. So in this case of a 5-pound rabbit, this would do just fine. So one of the components that I made is I have to have an anchor. And the anchor needs to be one that is, well, strong enough so when I'm putting it into the ground, it doesn't break. So I usually get something that's pretty girthy. And what I do on my anchor is about, I don't know, 9 inches to a foot. It really doesn't matter, just as long as when you put it in the ground, the trap doesn't yank it out, right? And then on here, I just carve a 7 notch, and I'll clean up that, but you get the idea. You have I take my saw and I carve in perpendicular to the stick, and then I just start shaving this away. And I like to make it just a little bit bigger because it gives me a little bit more room for error and room to work with. So we're not making furniture, you know what I'm saying? All right, and so for my trigger, I did the same thing. I have a 7 notch there, and then what I also did was I created some grooves in here just for my cordage. But the concept of this is that these hook together and they marry up, and they marry up very nice. Okay. Also, another reason why I give myself a lot of shave it down more than necessary is because it allows me to get a little bit closer in that notch. So then I have a good solid connection and it won't prematurely come undone. So let's go set this thing up. Now there's a few steps at this point. I have my spring pole cleaned up. Now I need to stake my anchor into the ground. But first, I'm gonna get my string so that I can gauge where I need to set my staking. I'm using some white rope here, or some white cordage here, just for ease so you can see what I'm doing. But typically I wanna use something that blends in or is not easily spotted. Okay, but I'm going to leave it connected to the line for now. And I'm going to go ahead and connect it to my snare pole. Now, I've seen, most people would tell you what not to use. I would just consider being able to recover your cordage when this is all said and done. So tie a knot that you can get untied easily and recover it. I'm going to go ahead and tie a clove hitch. Put my stopper knot on. Now, if you're wondering how to tie a clove hitch, I have a playlist with all sorts of knots. Okay, so we don't have to waste time on that. But I got that stopper knot there. This isn't going anywhere. And now what I can do is I can basically set this to where I want it. I know we're almost out of frame, so I'll have to make an adjustment, but I can almost drop it down to where it's perpendicular with the ground and use that as my marker to set my stake. Okay, so I got my snare pulled down and I can see where my line is and give me an indication of where to set my stake. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear this out. Now there's a couple considerations here. Depending on the type of trap that you're making, in this case we're just making a simple snare, so we're going to continue going on with what you're doing. But if you're using toggles, let's say your rabbit trail comes this way, we would want that notch to be perpendicular to the trail. That way when you have a toggle, you set this in here, right? It's not going to just come flying up, versus if you have your notch here or notch on this side, it can just get pulled right up for one thing. I'm going to go ahead and drive this into the ground. And without destroying my stick. Okay, so I got it there. A little bit more than 3-ish inches, but it's all right. Okay, so we're good there, and it's not coming out. So now that I have that, why we leave it connected to the string is now I can go ahead and gauge where I need to cut it, so I can attach my trigger to it. So, about right here. Okay, so again, to tie my trigger onto my snare line here, I'm just going to do a clove hitch. So to do a clove hitch, right over left, okay, create your ears, overlap them, and then I'm just going to stick my trigger through. I'm going to pull it tight, and then on this end I'm just going to create a knot, simple overhand knot. And then work all this through. Yep, till the knot is secured, and then I'd clean up the rest of this. Okay, so let's test it out. All right, let's go ahead and test everything out. Okay, so everything's holding nice, and so next we got to put a snare on it, and so when this gets interrupted, oh, bye-bye rabbit. So to put a snare on here, I'm going to go ahead and tie a loop. I'm going to go ahead and tie a snare loop. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to get a bite, tie an overhand knot, just like so. And on the rope that I'm actually going to use for my snare, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to tie another double overhand loop So now I have this loop. I would figure out the size of the loop that I would need, and I'll go ahead and cut it. So now I have one loop here and one loop here. Now all I would do is I'd feed the one loop through and all of my material through said loop, okay? Creates a girth hitch, but then I flip it and now I have a square knot, okay? Now we have to tie our loop. Okay, so to tie my loop, again, a million and a bajillion different ways to do it, okay? Just keeping it simple, I'm just gonna do a figure 8 slip knot. So I tie my figure 8, wrap it twice, and I pull this line through, okay? Get it tight. I have a stopper knot on the one end, okay? Now I'm sure there's better knots than that, so go ahead and let me know. I'm always willing to learn better ways to do things. But there's my loop, and so when the snare goes, it tightens down, and let me get my fingers here. Now what I would do with this then, because you're probably going, well, there's no bait stick, and that's fine. This would be on the rabbit trail, remember? So I would have this hanging up where the rabbit would come through, and so when that little sucker would come through, right, and I would adjust the loop to size, and when it comes through and activates the trigger, right, it's get caught, okay? So you don't need a trigger stick. So what you would do is, if this was the trail coming through here, lay your snare out and then brush around it, so then this becomes a funnel or a choke point, so the rabbit has to go through, or whatever critter has to go through this, and activates the trigger, gets caught up in the snare, and is bye-bye rabbit. So what if you find yourself without a spring pole? Well, you can simply use the same concepts that were applied to the spring pole and use resources that are available to you in your surroundings, like some dead wood. Ta-da! All right, so now that we talked about snares, that's all good and all along a rabbit trail, how to set up a snare along that trail, so then when they catch it, they go bye-bye. But what if we wanted to put on a bait stick? Well, I told you before that in lieu of having that other trigger with the 7-notch, we can use toggles, and here's one way. So here I just have a simple toggle that I just picked up off the ground. I mean, you can just pick these up off the ground and just break them to the size that you need. I'm gonna go ahead and shave down the sides so they're flat. Okay. So I have one flat side here, and then rotating it, I have another flat side here, and that'll come into play here shortly. So what I'm gonna do here is, I still have my loop from earlier, but what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go ahead and take that out for right now, because for this, I don't wanna do a close hitch, I wanna do a marlin spike so that it doesn't come undone on me. This is also known as a toggle hitch. At least that's what I've heard. Let me go ahead and get that secured there. Put a stopper knot in here. Out. There we go. So now, no matter what happens, this isn't going to go anywhere. Okay. And what I need for my bait stick is I just need a Y. So I'm gonna look on the ground here. Try to find a good piece right here. Okay, so I have this stick right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and break, boop, break, boop, and break. Now I have a Y, okay? And this is what I'm gonna use for my trigger. I'm gonna sharpen this end so I can stick some bait onto it. And then this end, that other flat side that I told you about, one side's gonna go in my toggle, and this is gonna simply just rest on it. Now remember what I said before is that if my rabbit trail is going this direction, I want my notch to be perpendicular to it. So in this case, my notch is on this side and my trail is running this way. All right, so here it is put together, okay? So the same concept as everything else. We got our spring pole or dead weight coming down to our anchor, and our bolt or our toggle is in that 7 notch, okay? And the rope is obviously wanting to yank that up right here, right? But that counter, whoa, well, there it is. Okay, so let's do that again. The string is wanting to pull the toggle up, right? But that pressure is being countered by the Y here. And on this end, I would put my bait right there. And so the way you would finish assembling this is you'd have your snare loop that we discussed earlier, and you would just have your snare around here. And the idea is that its front little paws come in here, start nibbling on that. And as we saw, bye-bye rabbit. So now we talked into some great lengths about snares and setting up snares. Let's talk about deadfalls. Deadfall in simple terms is using something heavy to crush something small. Okay, one of the things that you want to make sure of is that if you're going to use a log, you want to get a flat surface that's going to smush the critter. Reason being is that if it's round, it's less surface area you could potentially miss, or the critter could scramble and get away. If you're going to use a rock, you want to make sure it's big and wide for same reasons. As it's come crashing down, the little critter can't scamper away. There's several triggers to use for this, figure 4, breakaway. I'm going to share with you my favorite one though, because it's the simplest, I think. All right, now to give you a different perspective of it, just a up close and personal version of it. So I have my Y here with my bolt resting, the rock resting on my bolt there, creating that downward pressure, countered by my cordage attached to my toggle, which I wrap around my Y there, and you can see how it's wrapped to hold it in place down towards the base. If I have it up here, it's not going to do anything. I need it down here. And then my bait stick, my toggle is going to want to rotate counterclockwise, so my bait stick here is countering that rotation there. And so I would just simply, at this point, put my bait either at the end of the stick or smear some peanut butter or whatever along here, and when the critter comes by, boom, it collapses and goes smush. Well, that's it for traps and snares for this video. I tried to make it as simple as I could with simple concepts for us to build the foundation on. In following videos, I will expand on what we've learned here in this video, so don't freak out. Okay, with that being said, I hope you got some value out of it. Again, I wanted to make it just as simple as possible. That's how I roll, is I use the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. What's going to save you a lot of heartache is just go out and practice. Go out and practice it in your backyard, at the park, wherever you can. Just practice these trigger mechanisms and making them work. And some other things that can help you out is being able to identify animals based off of their tracks, off of their scat, etc. If you're not doing so already, make sure you follow the blog. I try to post as much information as I can on there. Link is in the description. Go check that out. I also do reviews on my favorite survival gear that I've personally used myself overseas, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places that I've been. If this video brought you some value, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share with a friend, and I'll catch you on the next video. And until then, prepare, train, and survive.